In this episode of Filmmaking for Noobs, we're looking at a filmmaking technique called the French reverse. If you're trying to make one of your sets look much larger than it really is, or if you're simply trying to save a little bit of time compared to a more traditional turnaround, then the French reverse may be your saving grace. When you're filming a scene, perhaps with two actors facing each other, talking to each other, typically you'll shoot everything one direction on one of the actors, and then you'll turn everything around to face the opposite way. You'll readjust your camera, your lighting, everything else, and then you'll shoot the other direction for actor B. This is called a turnaround or a reverse. Typically, turnarounds take time. In normal circumstances, you're looking at probably 30 to 45 minutes for a basic turnaround to reposition your cameras, your lights, and everything else in order to get everything reset and set up to now face the opposite direction that you weren't yet lit for. Sometimes, if this is a much more complex setup, it could take an hour or more to complete the turnaround. Not only is time a factor in this, but it also means you have to see the entire set. But some sets can be really expensive to dress. What if you only had to dress half the set? Or what if you didn't have to spend that much time turning around to face the other direction? There are many situations where either A, you really need to save an extra half hour by not completing a turnaround, or B, it's going to cost way too much or be way too time consuming to dress the entire set for whatever reason, or C, you really just need to make your location look much bigger than it really is. In any of those situations, a French turnaround or a French reverse may be really beneficial for you. In a nutshell, a French reverse is where you basically leave the camera and the lighting set up in roughly the same position, and then you move your actors to get a different shot. So rather than having your cameras and lighting revolve around your actors are now rotating with your camera and lighting staying in roughly the same place. Yes, it is a cheat. In a French reverse, your camera is facing one direction for actor A, and then your camera continues facing the same direction, your actors switch position, and now you're shooting actor B facing the same way as well. When the actors switch their positions and you're now onto coverage of the second actor, the actors cheat their position just a bit. The camera now moves to the other side of your physical axis line that you can see, but in reality you're keeping it on the same axis line as far as continuity goes from what the audience sees. And then you make a few small adjustments to your lighting. Once you've done all that, you completed the French reverse, and it was much quicker than an actual turnaround. I know it's a bit confusing to wrap your mind around, so let me give you a few real-world examples, and then we'll look at a number of things that you should keep in mind in order to successfully pull off a good-looking French reverse. In a short film that I directed in 2016 called Excelsior, we had one short scene that took place in a video game center. We had rented a pretty large open location that we could use for the video game center, but we could not afford to set up a whole bunch of computer monitors and TVs to fill the entire room. So we did a French reverse. We set up only a portion of the room to look like a video game center with computer monitors and TVs and fake video games galore. We shot primarily one direction for the master as well as one of the actors' close-ups. Then we kept most of the lighting the same, making only a few small adjustments. We kept the camera and the dolly and the track in the same position. We moved some of the background actors to different positions. We started the actors at the opposite side of their walking the opposite direction from what they did before, and we had the camera and the dolly move in the opposite direction. We then cheated this to make it look like we were now on the other side of the actors looking the opposite way. In this situation, we made our set look like it was twice as large as it really was. We made it look like we had twice as much dressing as we really had, and it took us only 5 to 10 minutes to complete the turnaround and change everything around for that next setup, compared to a full actual turnaround, which would have easily taken us over 45 minutes in those conditions. In another real-life example, go watch Season 1, Episode 4 of The Flash. In that episode, there's a scene where Barry and Felicity are sitting on a train having a conversation. In reality, the train car set that they used to film that was not very long. The director wanted to look like it was much longer and bigger than it really was, and so the director opted for a French reverse. Using a French reverse for this scene made the train car set look like it was twice as long as it really was, and made it look like Barry and Felicity were sitting in the middle of the train. This added a lot of depth and scope behind both of the actors, and made both sides of the conversation look quite a bit more cinematic and much more pleasing to the eye than it would have if they filmed normally inside of this one little train car set. To complete this French reverse, they had Barry and Felicity sitting on one far end of the train car set with the camera facing into the set. The entirety of the train car set and all of the background actors were then behind the actor that they were shooting. Once they completed the first half of that conversation, they then had the actors switch places, so now the camera was facing the same direction but looking at a different actor. They had the two actors move to the other side of the aisle in the train car, with everything else mostly staying in a very similar position. They then changed around or swapped out the background actors behind them, and they shot the other side of the conversation. Not only did this make the train car look a whole lot bigger, but it also saved a lot of time in that setup process between the two directions. When you are attempting a French reverse, there are a few really important things to keep in mind, otherwise you're going to really throw off continuity and it's going to really distract your audience from your story. First, the 180 rule still applies. In fact, abiding by the 180 rule is one of the things that's going to really help you sell the fact that you're actually facing a different direction, when in reality, you're not. If you don't know what the 180 rule is, or if you don't know what the axis line is, then I highly recommend you go back and watch one of my previous episodes where I teach you the 180 rule. There's a link in the description below. When completing a French reverse, you have to remember that your axis line is fixed to your actors, not to your camera. And so your axis line is now rotating with your actors and your camera's staying in the same position. That means that in reality, you are going to end up on the opposite side of the axis line physically in person, but you must make sure that you keep your camera on the same side of the axis line as far as what the audience sees, as far as the continuity of the scene, as far as the shots and angles themselves. North is now south, up is now down. It's really confusing, but you have to imagine that you have rotated everything and that you're now facing the opposite direction. Put your mindset and your head in that place. Convince yourself that you have actually moved the camera and are now facing the other way. That will help you a little bit to wrap your mind around making sure you're on the right side of the line and looking at the right side of the actor. And by right, I mean the correct side, not the left or right side. If your two actors are standing on an axis line which runs east to west, and your camera is on the north side of that axis line, then when you rotate your actors and therefore rotate the axis line around, your camera, which hasn't moved, must still stay on the north side of that axis line, which is now running west to east. Even though in reality, you're going to be physically on a different side of that actor in order to make it look like you've switched things around, or it's weird. It's really confusing. You can use the rule of thirds to help you with the placement of making sure that your continuity is correct. For example, if actor A is on the left side of frame with their eye lines to the right side of the camera, then actor B should be on the right side of frame with their eye lines to the left side of camera. What can really help you in completing the French reverse is this. Once you've established your first side of the scene, make a note of which side of the frame actor A is on and which side of the camera actor A is looking toward. Then, when you switch things around and keep the camera in mostly the same position and cheat everyone's positions a little bit, then at that point you'll place actor B on the opposite side of frame as actor A was on, and have actor B look to the opposite side of camera that actor A was looking to. The next piece to a French reverse is making sure that your lighting stays the same relative to the position of your actors, not relative to where the lights are actually placed in your set. Your lights should be adjusted to still maintain their same side of the axis line. Remember, you're cheating. If two actors are facing each other head on and you're filming actor A on the shadow side with a key light on the opposite side of the axis line as the camera, then that means that you should also be filming actor B on the shadow side with a key light on the opposite side of the axis line from camera. However, once you switch their positions rather than switching the camera's position, your lighting is automatically going to be on the wrong side of the line now. You must then readjust your lighting just a little bit to compensate for that. So the key light should stay on the same side of those two actors. So the key light needs to stay relative to the actors, not relative to the camera in this case, because you're cheating things and moving things around. If your key light is on actor A's right side, then that means that your key light is also on actor B's left side. When you switch the actors around, your key light will now by default be on actor B's right side, which means you have to move your key light to the other side of the actor in order to maintain the continuity. Otherwise, it's going to look like your source of light is flipping around from one side of the room to the other every time you cut between your two actors. So be sure to plan your lighting ahead of time and be prepared to adjust some lighting so that your key light and fill light and whatever other lights you're using can swap sides in a sense in order to make the continuity work. And that is how you French reverse. This technique can be really useful when your set or your location that you're using looks really nice facing one direction, but not very nice facing the other direction. Or if you can't afford to dress the entire set, but you can afford to dress half of it. Using this technique also adds a really big sense of symmetry because both sides of the conversation, the backgrounds look very similar. That's because the backgrounds are exactly the same. Your goal is to make it look a little bit different so it looks like it's not exactly the same, but just symmetrical. Make sense? You can also use this technique in order to save a little bit of time on a turnaround or in order to double the size of your set or location. When you're doubling the size of the location, ideally you would pick a wall that you will never see and you will place your camera closest to that wall, facing into the rest of your set. The French reverse can be a really useful technique, but it can also be really confusing to try to wrap your mind around, especially the first couple times that you use it. So definitely make sure that you plan ahead. You should know ahead of time that you're going to be doing a French reverse. This is not something that you want to come up with on the day while on set, unless of course you run into a crazy, unexpected bind and the only way to solve the problem is by using a French reverse. But typically, you should be doing whatever you can to plan this out ahead of time to know days before you shoot that you're already planning to shoot a French reverse. This will help to make sure everyone is on the same page and help everyone to get their mindset wrapped around this continuity and weird switching things around idea to help you maintain continuity so that your product and your film looks really amazing. And whether you are doing a French reverse or a more traditional turnaround, always remember that film is all about cheating. The only thing that matters is what your audience sees in the frame. Everything else outside of the frame does not matter. You're telling the story, you're creating the world, you're showing the audience what you want them to see, which means that you're showing the audience the orientation, the position of where you're looking simply through your frame. The audience does not have a bird's eye view of what's happening in the set. And so you can definitely cheat things, move things around, make things look bigger than they really are, make it look like you have twice as much of whatever stuff, extras, set dressing than you really have. If you're doing a more traditional turnaround, you can always move extras or move set dressing to the other side of the room once you complete your turnaround. This makes it look like you have a much larger crowd scene or makes it look like your set is much more full. Keep in mind it does take extra time to do the turnaround then because you're moving things around, but it is certainly doable. And if you're wanting it to look like a much bigger scene or a much bigger crowd or whatever the case is, then that's always an option that you have. I hope that this episode has helped you to understand some really useful techniques and tricks that you can use to make your productions look bigger, better, and higher production value. For more filmmaking tips, tricks, advice, and how-tos, please like, share, and subscribe, as that really does help me to continue producing this series for you. Thanks for watching Filmmaking for Noobs. Come back next week for more.